Joe was born with Angelman syndrome. We didn't realise anything was wrong at first, and over a course of months we realised there were different problems, and eventually 18 months down the line he was diagnosed with Angelman syndrome, which is a genetic deletion on his chromosome 15. And then over a course of the next year, Joe had a lot of troubles feeding and various different issues and fitting. And then we came across a whole new situation which was totally unrelated to Angelman syndrome and the disability he was born with, called Stevens-Johnson syndrome. And this is a reaction which can be viral triggered, or in Joe's case it may have been one of the fitting drugs he was on. And basically your skin blisters inside and out, and this went on for sort of 6 or 8 weeks. And he spent most of his time at Trelisk in HDU, and then towards the end of that he then became septic and had organ failure, and was rushed up to Bristol. And at that point we were told he wasn't going to make the journey and to say our goodbyes at Trelisk, but he made the journey up there and made some excellent recovery over the sort of next 4 or 5 months. Once he'd recovered from the septic shock and the organ failure that he had, he then was left with a new host of problems, such as he become oxygen dependent, and his lungs deteriorated over the sort of next 18 months. And he had a lot of problems with his kidneys. He had renal damage and was on a huge amount of drugs to compensate for his kidneys, and also the other difficulties he had with his digestive system.
What was your day like?
Normally I'd sort of get up, or Claire would get up around sort of 5:45, 6 o'clock. We'd do his morning drugs, and then just see if he needed changing or anything else that needed doing at the time. Towards the end we did have night staff in, so we had 7 nights a week, which didn't always happen, but most of the time we had a nurse in at night with him. And then we'd go through doing his drugs and his feeds and getting all his different medicines ready. I'd go off to work, and then Claire would be looking after Joe during the day. We'd have respite care during the day as well, and some help, especially if we'd been looking after him at night. So it was quite a long day, and then that would normally finish around sort of 12:30, 1:45, and that's if we had someone come in. So it depended what care we had and what help we had at the time, but there were long days, but you wouldn't change them for anything.
When did Joe's condition deteriorate?
I think from the point of when he had Stevens-Johnson syndrome, that was a real marker. That was the point where really he'd become life limited. And I think probably September last year he had 3 good months, and then from Christmas he started to deteriorate more and more in the last sort of 2 months of his life. I mean, we took him in via ambulance, I think 3 times in the middle of the night, which we'd never really done. We always used to drive him in ourselves straight to HDU, because it got to the point that even with the equipment we had at home, he needed more care than we could give him.
Were you mentally preparing yourselves for the inevitable?
I don't know if you can prepare yourself. You think you can, and I think when he went up to Bristol originally, we were preparing ourselves on the drive up behind the ambulance in the response car that we'd have to go up there and see him as a child that had died on the way up, rather than a child that had survived the journey. I mean, I think the way that Joe did die in the end, it was very dignified. We were in a hospital full of people we knew very well. We had a fantastic nurse on at the time. His consultant was there. Both sets of grandparents got down. Megan said goodbye to him. The end for us was a very dignified end. There's no right way or wrong way, but we made that choice to take the mask off and let him die naturally. Stevens-Johnson's reaction had started again, and his body had started to blister. His lungs, the last x-ray he had, were just 2 white patches, so the mechanics of his lungs had gone basically. And it was just the time where you couldn't have asked him to have done any more, and he just took his last breaths, and he was with us. And when he was born he was with us, and when he went he was with us, and it was a moment that I'll carry with me for forever really.
Did you and Claire ever think, why us? What have we done to deserve this?
Yeah, you do, but the minute you start doing that, no one can answer those questions. And as hard as it is to live every day without him, if we weren't doing things like the website, trying to raise awareness, I think for Joe, it would have been a lost opportunity for people to have told his story, because it is an amazing story. You know, we're very proud of how our son, you know, lived his life, even though it was 4.5 years. And, you know, the conditions he had, and then dealing with all the infections he had, to me, is just a real sort of inspiring way of trying to motivate yourself to do better things and make the best of the opportunities that you have.
What about the role that Children's Hospice South West has played in your lives?
Well, we had 4 or 5 appointments, which unfortunately we never got to Littlebridge House, because Joe would all of a sudden turn, and one day he did it the morning we were supposed to be going, and was too ill to travel. And we've still had visits. Even today we've had 2 of the guys come down from Devon to see us. A lot of support on the phone, a lot of support through letters and cards for Megan as well. The hospice isn't just about families going to have a rest and have a holiday. There's a lot of day-to-day support that goes on behind the scenes, which helps hold families like ours together through difficult times. And, you know, I don't think a lot of that's not realised. And I think Cornwall deserves this hospice. We've got a lot to offer in Cornwall. And there's a lot of families down here with life-limited children who can't always get to Devon. And I think, you know, for other children maybe to come out of the county as well and use the facility down here is going to be fantastic.
What was so special about Joe?
I think when you think of everything Joe went through, and sometimes when you'd be sitting up late at night till 3 in the morning in HDU, you'd have your hand on his arm or something like that, and you'd be drifting off half asleep, and you'd look up and he'd turn round, he'd woken up and he'd be looking at you with a big smile, with his dummy hanging out the side of his mouth, and he would make you feel like you didn't have anything to worry about. And he just had this air about him that could just turn your day around instantly. And he was just a very beautiful little boy. And, you know, we're going to miss him a lot, but there's so much for us to talk to people about with Joe in his life that I think, you know, he deserves that, and we'll always enjoy doing that for him.